Did either of you ever review classified documents in which Mr. Trump, his associates, had been unmasked?
Oh, yes.
Can you give us details here?
No, I can't.
Ms. Yates, have you?
Yes, I have, and no, I can't give you details.
The political use of raw intelligence data is a very, very serious crime and is a threat to the freedom in the United States of America.
The White House might expand the electronic ban on U.S.-bound flights, but the Department of Homeland Security is thinking about adding Europe and the U.K. to ensure safe travel.
A recent survey found 60% of small business owners were hoping Obamacare would be repealed.
Small businesses can't afford it. The last thing you want is for someone to government mandate how you run your business.
A Colorado teacher was suspended after hosting a Cinco de Mayo party during class last week in which students hit a piñata with a picture of President Trump on it. Even worse, the kids never got a turn.
What a pretty day as we start live from Washington, D.C. as you look at the Washington Monument in the background and the White House in the foreground, and now you come to Studio E here in Midtown Manhattan.
You're doing the play-by-play on our pictures.
It's a beautiful day. It's a little chilly.
You're the Brent Musburger of this generation. Remember? You are looking live.
I love Brent Musburger. He was good.
Now he's retired. He has a gambling site on Sirius.
Where he's pro or
he's pro gambling. No, I mean he said, "If you want to gamble, listen to me. Listen to my."
So he's
show.
like a professional.
Yes, I think it's a entrepreneurial effort. In the later part of his career, he's trying to focus that way.
Fantastic.
So should people listen to that instead of watching our show this morning? Is that what you're telling them?
No, absolutely not. Because we're not looking to gamble. Because Kentucky Derby, everyone lost their shirt.
There you go.
Right.
All right. Meanwhile, if you were watching the channel yesterday, throughout the afternoon and into the early evening hours, Sally Yates took the stage along with James Clapper right there. And here's essentially what this hearing was about. The Democrats wanted to know, was there collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians? And the answer to that is, at this point, there's no evidence, even though the FBI, the Senate, and the House are all doing investigations. No information to that. Meanwhile, the Republicans focused in on a law that apparently was broken. And during the campaign and during the transition period, apparently somebody unmasked the name of at least one Trump associate, Michael Flynn, and then released that to the press, released that to the Washington Post, and that is against the law.
What's going to be
so that's
hard,
what the
though?
Republicans focused in on.
We were asking the judge earlier, wouldn't this be easy to find out? Because they're talking about his conversations with the Russian ambassador last December. Aren't there only a few people that know who was involved in that conversation?
Only a few can unmask, but then they can tell people.
That's what he said. That's where it gets tricky, because they said, Yates and Clapper said under oath yesterday, they did not release it to the Washington Post. But how do we know they didn't talk about it amongst their friends and someone else?
Well, they said
one of the follow-up was, hey, did you tell a deputy or somebody else to leak that to the press? So this is really brought up, if you ask me, because of the president's tweet that Saturday morning when he said, Obama spied on me, sick, and he went on to other things to say, listen, was some of that going on? Now, on May 5th, Senator Rand Paul says, I want to find out if they were spying on me. And then he reiterated that last night with Sean Hannity. The show has nothing to do with Donald Trump. It shows he was just a candidate for president for a while, thought to be have a real shot at winning.
Well, if you missed it yesterday, Senator Lindsey Graham and Senator Chuck Grassley, they were questioning them yesterday in front of the Senate. Listen.
Did either of you ever request the unmasking of Mr. Trump, his associates, or any member of Congress?
Yes. In one case, I did.
Did either of you ever review classified documents in which Mr. Trump, his associates, or members of Congress had been unmasked?
Oh, yes.
You have. Can you give us details here?
No, I can't.
Ms. Yates, have you?
Yes, I have, and no, I can't give you details.
How did the conversation between the Russian ambassador and Mr. Flynn make it to the Washington Post?
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. Nor do I know the answer to that.
Well, we kind of know what happened, though. We know that the names were, some names were unmasked. And then, as we learned in the front pages of the New York Times, in the final days of the Obama administration, the NSA rules were relaxed so that they could distribute those names and that information as widely as possible to keep it as part of the public record, within the permanent government. Ultimately, though, was it just to destroy the opening months of the Trump administration? There are many who would say, obviously, they were trying to sandbag the new president, and so far they've done a pretty good job.
The president agrees with that. The president tweeted yesterday, his latest tweet was, biggest story today between Clapper and Yates is on surveillance. Why doesn't the media report on this? Hashtag fake news.
Well, it's choice news, not so much fake news, in that people are making a choice when they stack their news shows about what's going to be covered and what's not going to be covered. As far as the president goes, this is going to drive him crazy. So forget about it. Don't even watch this. There's no collusion. If there was, Democrats would have come running with it. Al Franken will be having 24-hour press conferences. So it's not happening.
Well,
so move on and don't worry about it. But focus on two. I'll tell you what, Democrats should be paying attention, because now you have a Republican in the White House. So if you don't like the fact that maybe, if you don't believe that there's any credibility that President Obama had this access and abused it, well, how are you going to feel differently that President Trump is in office now, and maybe you might be targeted?
Well, nobody can abuse it. The whole idea is not to abuse it.
Right.
It is, but Brian's right. He said it's choice news. Different media outlets are choosing to report it in different ways. The headline really is, there's still no evidence of collusion between Russia and President Trump.
No there.
Right. That's fact. We don't have any. Listen, we're a news organization. We're going to report it. If that ever comes to be, if we ever find evidence of that, we're going to tell you about it. So far, there's no evidence. And yesterday, we did learn that Yates and Clapper both said they did not release the information to the Washington Post. Period, paragraph. That's the story. But if you read the New York Times, that starts out, the whole article on the front page starts out about how General Flynn didn't lose his job until February. They're questioning the president for why he waited 18 days to fire him. I'm like, that's not the story.
Right.
Well, Judge Napolitano was on with us a little while ago, and he had this observation about the unmasking of the names, which was, to him, a big problem.
I think this shows a couple of things. One, there's too much raw intelligence data in the hands of too many people that can use it for bad purposes. Because, two, the political use of raw intelligence data is a very, very serious crime and is a threat to the freedom in the United States of America. There's too much spying, too much information, and too many people have it. I'm convinced there were efforts to destabilize him at the outset, and it appears that the President of the United States, Barack Obama, was aware of this.
So that's where we stand right now. That's always been something to the judge's defense. He's always worried about when it came to the NSA. What if they use the NSA against us, and how pervasive and big is their activity? Meanwhile, there's something else that came up. You might remember, it seems like years ago, it was only a couple of months ago, when the President of the United States introduced extreme vetting to some of these 6 and maybe 7 originally of these terror-laden nations. He wants to make sure, since they have no paperwork, that they're getting extreme vetting. So until then, he wanted a temporary ban. The order put out there before the Attorney General really got his job was not allowed to go through. The court stopped it. But first, it was Sally Yates, the acting AG, that stopped it.
That's right. And Sally Yates was fired because she did not support the president's travel ban, even though the Department of Justice Office of Legal Counsel said the ban was legal. So yesterday, John Kennedy, the senator from the great state of Louisiana, a Republican, asked her a very pointed question on how, look, the lawyers at the Department of Justice said it was legal, and yet she said it was unconstitutional. So that led to this conversation between the two of them.
At what point does a statute or an executive order become unconstitutional? Is it some a priori determination? It becomes, I'm telling you what I'm getting at, and I don't mean any disrespect. Who appointed you to the United States Supreme Court?
I was appointed.
That determined, isn't it a court of final jurisdiction decides what's constitutional and not? In fact, aren't most acts of Congress presumed to be constitutional?
They are presumed, but they're not always constitutional. And no, of course, I was not on the Supreme Court. And I can tell you, Senator, look, we really wrestled over this decision. I personally wrestled over this decision. And it was not one that I took lightly at all.
It wasn't. She and Ted Cruz also were discussing how President Trump could not refuse refugees, and yet she said nothing about when Barack Obama did exactly the same thing back in 2011 for 6 months regarding Iraqi refugees.
But let's remind everyone she was appointed by President Obama.
Right, and that's what part of the reason why Donald Trump had President Trump's administration had trouble getting their feet underneath them is there are so many Obama appointees still functioning in the White House and still there today. I think to be better off with empty desks rather than desks of people who are trying to undermine them.
As part of the permanent government.
Yes.
A lot of people agree with you. All right, let's hand it over to Jackie, who has headlines this morning. Hey, Jackie.
Hi, good morning. And good morning to everyone at home. An airport terminal looking more like a scene from Fight Club. Look at this. Hundreds of stranded passengers demanding answers this morning after Spirit Airlines canceled at least 9 flights at Fort Lauderdale Airport. Police forced to step in when travelers started violently pounding the counter, and then this brawl broke out. Several people taken into custody. Spirit canceling 300 flights in the past week as pilots negotiate contracts. The man accused of killing random people and terrorizing a city in a months-long shooting spree is finally behind bars this morning. Phoenix police linking this man, 23-year-old Aaron Cicito, to 9 murders and a dozen shootings between August of 2015 and July of 2016. He was arrested last month, suspected of killing his mother's boyfriend before investigators connected him to the shooting spree. And the top Democrat on the Senate Judiciary Committee under fire for exposing classified information. Senator Dianne Feinstein revealing the FBI spent nearly $1 million to hack into the San Bernardino terrorist's cell phone.
The FBI had to spend $900,000 to hack it open. And as I subsequently learned of some of the reason for it, there were good reasons to get into that device.
The price of nearly $1 million uncovered during questioning of FBI Director James Comey, the agency paying a third party to unlock the phone after Apple refused to do so. And another Trump is headed to Washington. Tiffany Trump will attend Georgetown Law School in the fall. The 23-year-old graduated last year from her father's alma mater, the University of Pennsylvania, with a double major in sociology and urban studies. We wish her well. Congratulations. And those are your headlines. Back to you guys.
I wonder if she'll live at the White House and then go down M Street
That's
over to
not
Georgetown.
a bad place to ruin.
Wouldn't that be great?
I'd like that.
Especially because it's hard to get dorms at Georgetown. So you can either stay at the White House to try to get a dorm, and you don't know who your roommate's going to be.
I think she would know who lives at the White House.
Right, she would know that.
Yeah.
But if she lives on campus, it might be a different story. You could save money.
If you're the president's daughter, don't you think it's pretty easy to get a dorm room?
No, it's really, we're all equal in America. Okay?
Good. All right. Meanwhile, 7:12 here in New York City, a major shift in the war in Afghanistan. Could President Trump send in more ground troops? An insider look at the options on the table with former Green Beret Commander Lieutenant Colonel Michael Waltz. He's next.
And former President Bill Clinton has a brand new job. And it's based on fiction.
And if you need to know while I'm still standing, you just fade away. Don't you know I'm still standing better than I ever did? Looking like a true survivor, feeling like a little kid. I'm still standing after all this time.
Here in San Ysidro, the Western Hemisphere's busiest land border crossing, the search for illegal drugs intensifies as agents try to stop the flow of heroin, and now heroin cut with the powerful narcotic fentanyl from hitting U.S. streets. The dangerous combo is blamed for a recent spike in mass overdoses across the country.
Every single day we come up with different plans, different operations, different ideas to be unpredictable.
Customs agents are also relying on intelligence more than ever before, but they estimate that they're only stopping about 10% of the heroin making its way into the U.S. from Mexico.
Past 5 years, we have and continue to see increasing interceptions of heroin.
The drug is even more deadly when fentanyl is added to the mix, making it up to 50 times more potent.
About 2.5 milligrams, about 2 or 3 grains, similar to a grain of salt, can actually be an overdose.
It all does the same thing in your brain. And when you are talking to addicts, and even if you told them, hey, there's fentanyl in this, they think, oh, great, that'll get me higher with less.
For the drug cartels, potency equals profit. Border experts insist there has never been an illegal drug more lucrative, with cheap production in Mexico often using raw supplies from China.
So it's a 3,000% markup. From if you take a kilogram of this stuff from China that's worth about $5,000, the street value is about $1.5 million. I mean, this is something that Pablo Escobar in the 1980s and Carlos Lara, the guys who made a whole lot of money on cocaine, this is beyond their wildest dreams for profitability.
And that has the Drug Enforcement Administration increasing the crackdown on the U.S. side of the border, with many agents believing it starts with doctors overprescribing legal painkillers.
People go to doctors, they get prescription medication for painkillers, they become addicted to it, and when they can no longer obtain those pills, they will go to heroin.
Some agents on the street have called this recent epidemic supercharged heroin. More easier to conceal, more difficult to find for agents here at this border crossing who see 60,000 cars and 30,000 pedestrians each and every day. In San Ysidro, California, Adam Housley, Fox News.
The beauty of running your own business. Big-time tax breaks. Well, not so fast.
This is one of the IRS's typical focus areas. So if you're, and it's very common today, people are self-employed, they work out of their house.
So what can you legally write off? Business use of your home or apartment is another good deduction. Just be sure to only claim expenses that relate to that part of the house you use for your business. Same goes for your car. Deduct costs related to that portion of its use for business purposes. And not just the mileage and gas and tolls, but also depreciation. In fact, you can depreciate the cost of any equipment you buy for your business over its useful life. And don't forget education. Costs of classes related to your business are also deductible. Stay within IRS guidelines to grab solid deductions if you're self-employed. In New York, I'm Jerry Willis.
We're going to sit down, take stock of where we're at. We're going to look to the future, determine what more is needed, if anything, and how we are going to determine that is based upon an update with the enemy situation.
Well, that is Defense Secretary, former General James Mattis, laying out his efforts to defeat ISIS. And part of the plan, taking the fight back to Afghanistan and possibly putting 3,000 to 5,000 more troops there. The Pentagon said to ask President Trump for that number in the region. But is this the right move? Let's ask former Green Beret commander and author of Warrior Diplomat, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Waltz. Lieutenant General, I should say. I'm sorry, Lieutenant General. Lieutenant Colonel. I don't want to give you too much
Brian.
credit, but you've done enough. Colonel, real quick, I mean, do you like the numbers that Mattis put forward?
I think they're about right. Look, I think let's be clear here. We're not talking about putting American troops on the ground where they're kicking in doors and they're holding territory. What we've been doing the last couple of years is supporting the Afghan army and supporting the Afghan police with an advisory effort. But that advisory effort has been too senior, kind of too strategic, too high level, so to speak. And we need to push those advisors down to the battalion, the brigade, and even the company level where they can really help the Afghans in the fight.
But what's the focus? To sustain that government, to kill off the Taliban, to wipe out ISIS? What is it?
Well, it is certainly to wipe out ISIS as an organization, but it's to blunt the Taliban's momentum. Look, Brian, what we can't do is walk away from Afghanistan like we did in Iraq and then have al-Qaeda resurgent, ISIS growing in the wake of a Taliban offensive. And that's exactly what will happen. It's what's slowly happening now. So look, I think we need to accept that we are going to be there for quite some time, supporting the Afghans in a supporting role. But, you know, the option of just leaving and letting these groups come back again and threaten the United States again is not a good one.
I mean, we lost a couple of guys there from Special Forces over the last 2 weeks, and then people are getting a little wary of that. Plus, President Trump has to make a decision, they say, before May 25th's NATO summit, so we can announce it and then try to get support for it, because NATO's helped us out significantly there. So he is he's America first. Let's stop spending on these foreign wars. Do you think that would be counterproductive for him and his strategy to write billions of dollars for an Afghanistan war that might not give them a complete victory? Would that be going against what he ran on?
Well, and I completely understand the America First approach, but he also ran on keeping America safe. And again, let's look at it this way. Pakistan has which is right next door to Afghanistan, a population of 200 million and nuclear weapons. Afghanistan, a population of about 30 million. If we let that area fall and degenerate into chaos, and we have a resurgence of Al-Qaeda and now ISIS again, America will be less safe. I think we're going to be engaged there for quite some time at a low level, a supporting level, like we've been in South Korea and other places fighting this idea of Islamic extremism.
Right, because, of course, they're training in Pakistan and coming over with brand new uniforms and brand new guns to fight in Afghanistan. So we have to do something about that. That certainly make things better.
I think we have to make a much tougher stance and take a firmer stance against Pakistan. Absolutely.
Lieutenant General Michael Waltz, thanks so much. It's good to know, too. You have General McMaster and General Mattis who served substantially in Afghanistan. That'll help.
They know what they're doing.
Yeah, I hope so, and I think so. Meanwhile, coming up straight ahead, reading, writing, and bashing a president. Yep, I'm talking about a piñata with the president's face on it. We're going to talk to the people that expose this story.
Time now for some quick Tuesday morning headlines. First up, Russia showing off its firepower with a massive military parade. More than 10,000 soldiers marching through Moscow. Vladimir Putin, the president, looking on as the Kremlin rolls out big missiles. The annual parade marks the Soviet Union's victory over Nazi Germany in World War II. Meanwhile, back here at home, President Clinton, former president, is trying his hand at fiction. The former commander-in-chief is teaming up with best-selling novelist James Patterson to write a new thriller. The President is Missing, the name of the book, said to be informed by details that only a president can know. The book is due out about a year from now, in June 2018. All right, Ainsley.
All right, thank you, Steve. Well, this is what Cinco de Mayo looked like at one Colorado high school when a teacher allowed her students to bash a piñata with President Trump's face on it. And one mother who didn't even vote for President Trump is furious. Joining us now from Denver, Colorado is Leslie Hollywood, the mother, and her daughter, Haley Marcantonio. She's a student at Roosevelt High School. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Okay, so I'll start with you, Leslie. As the mother, why did you decide to come out and speak out against this?
Well, first of all, I want to point out one thing, that this is actually a male teacher. I'm not sure why this keeps getting confused, but this is a male teacher that we're talking about. So I saw this, and I saw it on Snapchat, because these kids are putting this stuff all over social media, and I was just, what the heck? This is happening in my daughter's high school. And I said, to me, I just, of course, wanted to say something. I would like to have just taken it right to the administration, except for it was Friday evening. So I put a couple pictures on Facebook and said, this happened at my daughter's school today.
Haley, you're not in that teacher's class, correct?
Yeah, I've never had that teacher in my 4 years of being at the high school.
What was your reaction to this happening, and what's your reaction to your mom's response as well?
Honestly, my reaction at first was kind of shocked, because I understand that some of these students have views that aren't the greatest about Donald Trump or Mexico's president, which was on the other side of the piñata. But I was shocked that it was allowed at school during school hours. And it was difficult having my mom post about it on Facebook. At first, I thought it would be a really good idea to get the word out there, but it's just can't come downhill because of it.
Well, Leslie, you didn't even vote for President Trump. You were a Gary Johnson supporter, from what I understand. And now I'm hearing that you're getting death threats. I mean, this is getting pretty scary. What's happening? What's the reaction?
Well, so the reaction was, and to me, I'm not on a witch hunt here. I just think this needs to kind of be looked at. Was this an appropriate activity at school? We already live in such a divisive political climate. Why are we dividing these students even more? Why are we putting them in situations where they're going to be bullied? We have to face suicide in high schools right now, the things that are happening. I voted for Gary Johnson. For me, this isn't about Trump. On the other side of the piñata was Mexico's president. And I'm not really sure that makes it better, though. To me, it just makes it worse. Why are we putting these political figures on a piñata?
Yeah, I was shocked when I read about this story. I was shocked to know that a teacher actually would do this. I mean, we all can have our opinions, but to be political in the classroom is something else. The teacher has been suspended, and we do have a statement from the superintendent of your county, of your school district, says this was an incredibly disrespectful act that does not reflect the values of Roosevelt High School or the school district. So, Haley, what are your students, what are your friends at school saying? Are they agreeing with this teacher, or are they agreeing with your mom?
It's a little bit of both. My friends that have been here for me through it all have been more supportive of it and understand it from both point of views, that it's bad for the teacher and it's also bad on my mom's part. But there are some people that have been very vicious about it, that have been just tearing my mom and I apart just because of the little bit of issue that my mom had.
I'm really sorry about that. Haley, are you able to see that your mom is just standing up for the right thing and being righteous and doing what she's called to do? Because she didn't even vote for President Trump, and your mom is saying it's not about that. It's about respecting our president and the leader of this great country.
Yeah, I totally see that. I agree with her that even if you aren't a big fan of Donald Trump, that he's still, or even Mexico's president, that they are still large political figures and they need to be respected no matter what.
All right. Well, hats off to both of you. Thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate your courage. Leslie and Haley, have a great day.
Thanks. Thank you.
You're welcome. Liberals are taking attacks on Republicans to a whole new level.
My wife, when she was diagnosed 18 years ago, did I just hear when you talk about somebody who fought cancer? That's offensive.
That disgusting moment, a congressman is heckled as he is discussing his wife's battle with cancer. That's straight ahead. And the Senate already sending signals that we might not see a vote on health care reform until next year. Speaker Paul Ryan managed to get a win in the House. He is live. He's coming into our studio to react to that straight ahead and tell us what the real timeline looks like.
Request the unmasking of Mr. Trump, his associates, or any member of Congress?
Yes. In one case, I did.
Did either of you ever review classified documents in which Mr. Trump, his associates, or members of Congress had been unmasked?
Oh, yes.
You have. Can you give us details here? In this?
No, I can't.
Ms. Yates, have you?
Yes, I have, and no, I can't give you details.
How did the conversation between the Russian ambassador and Mr. Flynn make it to the Washington Post?
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. Nor do I know the answer to that.
Well, that's all. All right. And joining us right now, we've got the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan. Good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
In studio. A very rare appearance. Thank you so much.
Before we get to that, congratulations on health care. I bet that was a good day for you.
It was a very good day for us.
Yeah, no kidding.
We're keeping our word. We're keeping our promise.
Let's talk about health care in a moment, but first, a little bit about what happened yesterday. I know that you were busy as Speaker of the House, but over on the Senate side, they had that hearing. It's interesting. The Democrats wanted to talk about whether or not there was collusion between the Russians and the Trump camp. No evidence of that at that point. But the Republicans wanted to talk about how somebody inside the government unmasked a name or two and then leaked it to the Washington Post, and that they say is a crime.
Yeah, that is a crime, and so that is taking classified information, unclassifying it, and leaking it out. That is something somebody in the Obama administration decided to do, and it did happen. So the question of this investigation is to get to the bottom of that. Obviously, you saw they basically said we saw this information, but they didn't give us any details. That's why we have an investigation. We also have a classified investigation to get into the classified side of this, to sort of reverse engineer this, to find out who did this, because that is illegal.
Do you think the motivation, though, on whomever did this was to sandbag the Trump administration?
Well, I'm not going to prejudge this investigation because we're in the middle of it, but it certainly looks like that. It certainly looks like this was politicized.
That's what the Senate's doing. What is the House doing?
Same thing. We're doing the same thing. We have the same kinds of hearings. We also do this in a classified setting so that we can so that those questions can be answered in a classified setting. They said they wouldn't answer it, but in a classified hearing, they have to answer it.
So let's talk about health care. So that celebration on Friday, Democrats were chanting as you pass this, goodbye, meaning there goes your majority. Number one, on a personal level, does that bother you?
It's kind of childish, I think, sophomoric. More importantly, I think what's happening is the left is seeing their vision of government-run healthcare evaporate before their eyes, and it's really disturbing to them. But here's the problem. This law is collapsing. This law is failing fast. And so what we're doing is a rescue operation, which is getting rid of this law, which is collapsing. Iowa last week, the last insurer said we're pulling out. That means in 94 of 99 counties in the state of Iowa, no health insurance choices. 5 states are down to 1 insurer left. Maryland just announced a 58% premium increase for next year. Aetna just pulled out of Virginia. This law is collapsing, and people aren't getting any care, let alone affordable care.
One of the architects of Obamacare blamed Republicans and Donald Trump for that. He says, you guys are causing that and blaming us.
This is because Obamacare didn't work to begin with. It basically said we're going to force people to buy something they don't want to buy. We're going to force younger, healthier people to way overpay for health care to try and subsidize everybody else. That didn't work. And so we have a better system. What our plan does is it is aimed at getting premiums down, letting people have a plan that they want that's more affordable. And yes, our plan has layers of protections for people with pre-existing conditions. We think there's a much better way to do this so that people can get lower premiums and people with pre-existing conditions can also get access to affordable coverage. And that's what our plan achieves.
What's your response to the Americans that are watching when they were listening to some of the Republicans that were in Congress before repeal and replace was passed through the House that were saying that you wouldn't let them look at the bill when it was written and that you were not as eager?
That's actually just not true. Our bill was online for a couple of months. The last amendment was a 3-page amendment. Obamacare was over 2,000 pages. This bill is less than 200 pages, and it was posted online for over a month. Anybody in America, anybody in the world could read this bill.
So how is that narrative spread?
What I think is the left is spreading these narratives to try and just basically throw sand in the gears because they don't want to see Obamacare go away. They want their vision of a government-run system take over health care occur, and it's not happening. Look at what our plan does is it says give people more choices. Give them a tax credit so they can go buy a plan that they want.
Right.
And what we also learned is in many states, like my own state of Wisconsin or the state of Maine, they had really good systems in their states that guaranteed people with pre-existing conditions got really affordable health care. And what we're basically saying is let's have state and federal assistance for people with catastrophic illnesses. Directly subsidize their expensive care so that they get affordable care, but that means everybody else doesn't have to pay for that, so you can lower premiums for all other people in America. That's what we're trying to achieve here.
So after the House passed health care, did you call up Mitch McConnell?
I did call up Mitch McConnell. I said, the ball's in your court now. We're excited to get working with you guys. They were already preparing a plan, meaning a group to get this processed over there, because we made a promise. We made a promise to the people who sent us to Congress that we would repeal and replace this failing law with patient-centered health care to get lower premiums, lower prices. And yes, we have multiple ways of making sure that a person with a pre-existing condition, with a catastrophic illness, gets affordable coverage. And the way we propose to do it is a way where everyone can have access, where we can get lower premiums.
How long is it going to take? Because the media, mainstream media, Democrats are all saying it's going to be 2018.
Senator Coons said that yesterday.
You know, you can't. It's not going to turn on overnight. It takes a couple of years to put a new plan in place. It took about 6 years for Obamacare to get put up.
Yeah, but what about passing the legislation?
Oh, the legislation.
In the Senate.
The legislation should not take that long. Hopefully, it takes a month or two to get it through the Senate.
Really? You think it'll happen by the fall?
Hopefully, it takes. Oh, yeah. Hopefully, it takes a month or two because we need to give people the ability to plan. The insurers are pulling out very, very quickly, and we need to show the insurers that there's a better system coming. Stay in the market.
So I'm sure you noticed, Mr. Speaker, very popular talk show host Jimmy Kimmel comes out and talks about a personal story with him. His son was born with with heart disease and needed emergency care. And he said, health care shouldn't matter for someone. It shouldn't matter how much money you make, the type of health care you get. So he came out, and then Senator Cassidy, a Republican, came out and said, there should be a Jimmy Kimmel test. Pre-existing conditions have to be covered. And then there was a back and forth. So Jimmy Kimmel came back on the air last night, and he said this, and I want you to respond.
Since I am Jimmy Kimmel, I would like to make a suggestion as to what the Jimmy Kimmel test should be. I'll keep it simple. The Jimmy Kimmel test, I think, should be no family should be denied medical care, emergency or otherwise, because they can't afford it. Can that be the Jimmy Kimmel test? As simple as that?
Well, that's
It's a totally legitimate test. Let me give you an explanation of what we had in Wisconsin. Before Obamacare, we had 10% of the people in the individual market was in the risk pool. They had 8 or 9 plans to choose from. They had an open network. They could go to any doctor, any hospital they wanted to. And their premiums and deductibles were cheaper then than what they are under Obamacare. And the other 90% of Wisconsinites who did not have a pre-existing condition had even cheaper health insurance because we focused our support for the people who needed it the most, and that lowered the cost of premiums for everybody else. So we think we have better answers for making sure that people in the Jimmy Kimmel world can get access to affordable coverage.
He says the follow-up appointments are the key. He goes, they'll treat you if you get to the hospital.
You need to have coverage. So you need to have an insurance plan. That's what we're talking about.
Well, can't you argue that it's because of Obamacare that these insurance companies are dropping out and therefore people aren't getting coverage?
That's a great point, Ainsley. What good is Obamacare if you don't even have health insurance? What good is it for those people in Iowa that won't even have one plan to choose from? Obamacare, you can't get coverage for pre-existing condition if none is being offered to you. And that's why we have to step in and rescue this thing from collapse.
Mr. Speaker, what about under Obamacare, people who are older can pay up to 3 times more than somebody who's younger? There's a story out there that under your health care plan that passed the House last week, that older people might actually pay 5 times more.
Yeah, see, that's the way insurance is priced. What Obamacare tried to do is it tried to shrink the cost differences by saying, young people, you're going to pay a whole lot more than you otherwise would to subsidize everybody else. What happened was young people said, I'm not going to do it. I'm just not going to buy the insurance. I'll pay the fine. And therefore, Obamacare is in what they call a death spiral, which is it's not affordable and the premiums are getting really expensive and plans are pulling out. So what we're saying is let's just give tax credits and bigger tax credits for older people, more for people in their 50s and 60s, so they can afford that coverage, because that way you're not overcharging young people so they do buy the insurance.
I know you want to talk taxes, so does everybody else, because that's the main thing business wants. Wall Street's right down the block, too. But I just want a real question about health care. You now on the Senate side, and I know it's their problem, but you're watching. You have Susan Collins, who's a moderate. You got the ultimate Republicans like Rand Paul and Ted Cruz. They can only lose 2 votes. You can lose 22 votes. How could they possibly get that together?
I think they can get that together because we made a promise to the American people.
But they're tearing up your plan.
The Senate's going to do their thing. That's what the legislative process is. This is how legislation works. You have a big debate in the House, you pass a bill. You have a big debate in the Senate, you pass a bill. Then you go what we call reconcile the differences. That's how legislation is drafted.
I know President Trump wants it done yesterday.
That's great.
So
we love. I love the fact that he wants to get things done for the American people, and he's pushing us hard, which is what we want to see happen. The point, Brian, is this law is collapsing. It's not working. We have better ideas for how to replace it and address these needed goals.
Right, but you know Ted Cruz and Susan Collins have a dramatically different thing.
They do. Ted Cruz, this shows you how big of a tent our party is. From Susan Collins to Ted Cruz, the point is both of them live in states where Obamacare is failing, and both of them said that they would repeal and replace this law, and that's what we have to make good on.
Okay, so your big plan was take care of health care, then move on to taxes. We're going to talk about taxes on the other side of a timeout. Can you stick around 2 more minutes?
Sure.
Good answer. For Speaker Ryan, 2 minutes.
The music set me on fire, and then I was saved.
Hello to all of our viewers in New Zealand watching on Sky. Thanks for watching Fox. For more, go online and check us out on foxbusiness.com as well as foxnews.com. Keep it here.
Auto technology is constantly changing, and for some, it can be difficult to keep up with. AARP is now helping drivers understand some of the safety features on vehicles nowadays, like lane departure warnings, front collision avoidance, and backup cameras.
There's a significant need for the awareness and education of these technologies, and I think that's where a program like this really helps to fill that gap. What we're finding through these workshops for the individuals who actually had recently purchased a vehicle, they weren't 100% confident in how to use these technologies, or even if they were turned on, for example, in their vehicle.
Senior drivers can take 60 or 90-minute interactive workshops led by trained instructors which focus on in-car safety technology. Participants receive a checklist to use when car shopping, along with other safety and technology resources. Carolyn Stevens recently took the Smart Driver Tech program and says she learned more about some of the safety features newer cars have.
The drowsy alert, which means for truck drivers or someone who's been on the road for a while, the camera inside of the vehicle will monitor the person's inactivity to send flash to the person to alert them to wake up and focus back on driving.
But it's not just the technology that can inhibit seniors behind the wheel. Physical health conditions can also be a factor. AARP says 2 out of 5 50-plus drivers find it difficult to look behind when backing up, and 1 in 5 are challenged by the movement required to check blind spots when changing lanes.
The technology is very important. For one, as a mature adult or a senior, we need to know what's available to help us to maintain our independence as a driver, to keep us safe, and that we're able to drive well.
AARP currently offers this driving program in 4 states, including here in Texas, with plans to roll it out to another 4 states soon and then nationally not long after that. In Dallas, Casey Stiegel, Fox News.